From the forgotten to mysterious vanishings, history often throws curveballs at us when we look back. It took humanity thousands of years to be so dangerously powerful to itself, and at the same time, life and communication are more convenient than ever. Yet, historical records often confound us with presenting records of events and inventions mentioned centuries ago that have only been around for only a few decades or are still a thing of science fiction, like weapons of mass destruction from ancient Indians and Greeks, to flying chariots, to discs from ancient Egyptians and Mesopotamians. Here are the creepiest and scariest events from history that make sense only in science fiction. Plutarch's Unexplainable Phenomena. Plutarch's text Lucullus offers something crazy, but in no way a linkable account of a flying saucer sighting. He mentions a battle in the western part of Anatolia, now Turkey, at Phrygia, in a place called Otriae, that was interrupted by a bizarre sight. He most likely was talking about one of the battles of the Third Mithridatic Wars that were fought between the Roman Republic and King Mithridates VI of Pontus. Plutarch cited eyewitnesses from both armies involved in the battle. When the armies were lining up for the charge, without any apparent sign of change in the weather, many of them witnessed a huge flame-like body fall into the middle of the battleground as the sky burst asunder. Shaped like a wine jar and colored like molten silver, this vessel made everyone present stumped and astonished, and no fighting happened that day. No blood was spilled on both sides, as both sides considered this incident as an omen. The Roman general Lucullus breathed a sigh of relief. Despite bringing 30,000 infantry and 2,500 cavalry to the battle, he was daunted by the size of Mithridates' army and was reluctant to engage from the get-go. Another interesting fact about this battle is that despite having a larger army, the general of Pontus, Marius, had a shortage of provisions to feed so many men. The delay in the battle benefited Lucullus as he learned about this shortage and insisted on further delaying the battle long enough to make Marius retreat. Now, it could be quite possible that whatever fell on the battleground that day was perhaps a display of Roman theatrics to postpone the battle and not something otherworldly. Unfortunately, Plutarch didn't mention what happened to this flaming vessel after the war. About 100 years later, Judean historian Josephus mentioned witnessing an aerial battle among battalions of flying chariots that were hurtling over clouds and encompassing the cities. To make sure he wasn't hallucinating, he sought other observers who also admitted noticing the sight of an aerial battle. In the 1560s, the residents of the towns of Nuremberg in Germany and Basel in Switzerland also witnessed some kind of aerial battles in the time gap of 5 years from each other. The event cited by the Nuremberg residents was recorded on a woodcut broadsheet by one Hans Glauber. What fishermen of Basel described what they saw as red and black orbs battling in the sky, the Nuremberg account mentions flying objects in various shapes, like orbs, crosses, cylinders, and a black arrow-like vessel. The Nuremberg people also heard a major crash and explosion a few miles outside the city, but no follow-up or search operation was ever recorded, and both accounts, like the one in Judea centuries ago, were considered some sort of religious events. The children who didn't look like children? You may have heard of the legendary story of how a dramatized broadcast of H.G. Wells' science fiction novel The War of the Worlds in 1938 by the CBS radio network caused actual paranoia among American citizens about an extraterrestrial invasion. Even though Wells' novel had quite a different portrayal of extraterrestrial species, around the same time the trope of otherworldly intelligence being little green men was born. From Spielberg's E.T. to Looney Tunes' Marvin the Martian, the trope became the standard portrayal of extraterrestrials in pop culture for most of the 20th century. But could it be possible that the trope had a much older and darker origin story? Around 900 years ago, England was ruled by a king with a very unlikely name, Stephen, during a tumultuous period that is now remembered as the Anarchy. But the day we're talking about was like any other day in the middle of the year 1150. The residents of the ancient town of Woolpit in Suffolk came across two children in the wild who looked nothing like something they had seen before, one boy and one girl. One could say these children could have walked right out of the pages of the Brothers Grimm's book. They looked as magical and otherworldly as the fairy tales that originated during these times. Some believe that the old name of Woolpit was actually Wolf Pit, and it was a settlement of wolf pelt hunters, and these strange kids were also discovered trapped in their wolf pits. The kids looked like creatures of the Feywild, as described in the Celtic mythology. They were feral, with leaves, twigs, and whatnot stuck in their hair. Their clothes were tattered and muddy, and they spoke a language that villagers couldn't understand. In fact, they said that the language had no recognizable sounds or speech patterns. But what made them look the most otherworldly was their green-tinged skin, and they wouldn't eat anything but green beans harvested by the farmers of the town despite being severely famished and malnourished. It took them months to get used to eating bread and try other vegetables and perhaps meat, as they mostly ate just beans only. The villagers escorted these kids to the home of the local lord, a knight called Sir Richard Calne, who graciously took them into his ward and looked after them in his manor. After a few months, the boy succumbed to a sickness he caught in the manor, but the girl lived on, eventually losing the green tinge, learned English, was officially adopted by Sir de Calne, and became a proper lady as she grew up. She was baptized in Christianity and was given some sort of position in the Lord's household. After she learned to communicate in English, obviously the question of her origins was inquired, and this is where the story becomes even stranger. She mentioned her name was Agnes Barr, and she was an inhabitant of a distant land where all people were green-skinned and ate only green food. She said the land was called St. Martin and had a perpetual twilight. On the question of how she arrived in Suffolk, she was as confused as the village folk. She mentioned that the two children were tending their father's flock when they heard an explosion that shook the ground. Curious, they walked in the direction of the noise and came upon a cavern. They wandered into the cavern and got lost, and after wandering for some time, they came out on the other side in the excessive sunlight and unusual temperature. That's when they were found frightened and disoriented by the villagers of Woolpit. Unlike most folk tales that originated during this period, this story has no Christian morals attached to it and has real names and places mentioned in it. Some people have theorized that these kids could belong to some town in Flanders across the sea, which does provide a reason why these kids spoke a language that appeared to be gibberish to the British villagers. But it still doesn't explain how they traveled this far and across the sea. The ball lightning. On August 6, 1753, a pioneering Latvian physicist was attending a conference at the Imperial Academy of Sciences and Arts in St. Petersburg. He was distracted by the sound of distant thunder and saw the tempest rising through the window. The physicist was Georg Wilhelm Richmann, known for his experiments on natural electricity, and he had a device at his residence named the electrical gnomon to measure the strength of atmospheric electricity that he would use in every storm to record readings. Unable to resist the temptation, Richmann excused himself to rush to his residence and began his experiment. He was examining an electroscope when a bolt of ball lightning struck the device and traveled straight to the physicist's head. It passed through him, blowing a hole in his left shoe and sending him flying across the room. He died immediately, and his device was destroyed as well, making him the first scientist to die experimenting with electricity. During his death, Richmann was not alone. Mr. M. Skolaw, an engraver to the Academy, was present during the fatal experiment and witnessed the mishap as well as the scientific legend ball lightning that induced death upon an enthusiastic scientist. A century and a half later, Tsar Nicholas II would also swear to witness this elusive phenomenon in person. But does the ball lightning actually exist? It is estimated that almost 1 in every 150 people swear that they have seen this phenomenon in person. They can be explained best as independent spheres made of nothing but lightning floating a few inches or feet above the ground. Also, some people claim that these things can pass through walls and matter while maintaining the dangerous properties of lightning. A total of about 10,000 cases have been reported until now. The earliest known record of this phenomenon comes from the 12th century Benedictine monk Gervas of Christ Church Cathedral Priory in Canterbury, who saw a marvelous sign descending near London on June 7, 1195. He described a dense, dark cloud emitting a white substance, and we do believe that was not a euphemism. He noticed that emission soon formed into a sphere as it fell rapidly towards the River Thames. Before Gervas's account was discovered, the earliest known account was also from England, where a ball lightning was reported during a great thunderstorm in Widdicombe, Devon in 1638. Over the years, many scientists have tried to explain why, how, and if ball lightning happens, and despite many explanations, none of them have managed to satisfy the entire science community. In January 2014, scientists from Northwest Normal University in Lanzhou, China, claimed to artificially reproduce a natural ball lightning, but the claims have been disputed over the years. Recently, the theory by John Abramson of the University of Canterbury and Christchurch, New Zealand, has gained some traction. He has suggested that when lightning strikes silicon-rich soil, a chemical reaction occurs that makes silicon, oxygen, and carbon swirl together and create a glowing, fiery ball. Now, even if this theory is accurate, how ball lightning passes through walls and other materials is yet to be explained. Are there any Einsteins watching? Let us know in the comments on how we can solve this problem. Sightings before Roswell. The Roswell incident is considered a huge historic moment among flying saucer enthusiasts and the tinfoil cap wearers of the world. They often cite it as groundbreaking evidence of the extraterrestrial presence on the Earth. But even the flying disc craze of 1947 wasn't the first time people of the Earth were gazing and pointing towards the sky, citing unexplainable phenomena. In fact, thousands of years-old civilizations have recorded mentions of such events, and some have even cited interactions with such visitors. The alleged oldest known record of such interaction comes from the mesmerizing civilization of ancient Egyptians who believed that their version of the afterlife existed in the Orion's Belt. Alberto Tulli, the former director of the Vatican City's Egyptian Museum, reportedly came across a papyrus in Cairo in 1934 when he was there with his brother, who was a priest at Vatican City. The papyrus was in possession of a local merchant who was demanding too much money for the two pious men's purses, but he allowed them to make a copy of it. Over the years, this copy went through multiple translations, and supposedly it mentions a record from the times of Pharaoh Thutmose III, who most likely ruled the land of Egypt from 1481 BC to 1425 BC. The papyrus allegedly mentioned that the scribes of the House of Life observed a circle of fire descending from the sky. A circle of fire? It had no head, but emitted a foul breath from its mouth without making a voice. They dated this incident happening in the year 22, in the third month of the winter, in the 6th hour of the day. This could be the 22nd year of Thutmose III's rule, placing it around 1458-1459 BC. The scribes further wrote that most of these discs kept appearing like a gathering of an armada, and then they vanished to the south, dropping a rain of fish and birds in their wake. Could this also be related to the rain of frogs mentioned in the Bible that allegedly brought terrible illness to Egypt during the reign of Ramses II? Nevertheless, it was a fascinating encounter if it was true. It is quite a coincidence that such accounts on both occasions came from men related to a certain religion. Thanks for watching Nutty History. Please like and share the video if you enjoyed it, and do subscribe and ring the bell for more videos like this in the future.